Megan heard the sound first, a thin, piercing cry, almost like a child's. But children don't wander alone in the northern forests of Minnesota. She froze, listening, her hand automatically reaching for the hunting knife on her belt. The wind died down, the pines stopped whispering, and then the sound came again, desperate, lonely, filled with such pain that it caught Megan's breath. Ignoring safety protocols and common sense, she moved through the undergrowth toward the cry. As a field biologist with 5 years at the Department of Natural Resources, Megan Lynch knew better than anyone, you shouldn't interfere with wildlife. But something in that voice made her break her own rules. The sound led her to a tree down by a storm. In the hollow between its roots lay a small creature with spotted fur, so exhausted it could barely lift its head. A lynx. A cub. No older than 3 months. And it was alone. God, she whispered, dropping to a crouch. Lynx were rare in this region, and this baby looked like it hadn't eaten for days. Had its mother been killed by poachers? Or perhaps by disease? Megan knew the protocol: call wildlife rescue. Don't approach, don't touch. But the nearest road was 15 kilometers away, and darkness was less than an hour off. The tiny creature looked at her with amber eyes, and there was no fear in that gaze, only fatigue and, perhaps, a tiny spark of hope. I can't just leave you here, she said quietly, unzipping her jacket. When Megan slowly extended her hands, the lynx cub didn't run. It only made a weak sound similar to the one that had led her here. She gently lifted the baby. It was lighter than she expected and colder. Too cold. Hang in there, little one, Megan whispered, pressing the trembling body to her chest and wrapping it in her warm jacket. I won't leave you. Returning to camp, Megan was keenly aware that she was breaking all the rules. Her colleagues from the research team would be shocked, the reserve director furious, and Tom, her project manager for the wolf tracking project, would be simply relentless. Interfering with natural selection, he would say. Sentimentality that has no place in science. But right now, Megan didn't care. She felt the weak heart beating next to her own and knew she would do everything possible to save this life. At the camp, everything happened exactly as she had predicted. Have you lost your mind? Tom raged when she emerged from her tent with the lynx cub. That's a federal violation. You're risking the entire project. She was dying, Megan replied quietly but firmly. Tomorrow, I'll take her to the rehabilitation center. One night won't change anything. It's a wild animal, Megan. Tom lowered his voice, coming closer. Not a house cat. You can't just. But the lynx cub chose that exact moment to poke its head out from under Megan's jacket and look directly at Tom with its stunning autumn leaf-colored eyes. Tom stopped mid-sentence. 24 hours, he said finally. Then she goes to the center. And that's not up for discussion. Megan nodded, but somewhere deep inside she already felt that something had changed. The lynx cub looked at her with an unfathomable expression, as if it could see her soul. And Megan knew she couldn't just hand it over to strangers, even if they were specialists. That night, curled up in her sleeping bag with the small trembling body beside her, Megan cried until dawn for the first time in many years. She didn't know if this tiny creature would survive until morning. She didn't know if she had done the right thing by interfering. The only thing she was certain of was that this day had changed something in her, and there was no going back. When the first rays of sun illuminated the tent, she felt a slight purring. The lynx cub had nestled against her neck and was sleeping, breathing deeply and steadily for the first time. The rehabilitation center was a 3-hour drive from the research station. Megan spent those hours with the lynx cub curled against her chest, swaddled in a soft blanket she'd borrowed from the first aid kit. Every bump in the road made her wince, afraid the movement would disturb the fragile creature. You need a name, she whispered, one hand on the steering wheel, the other gently stroking the cub's spotted head. The morning light caught in its fur, revealing hints of gold among the brown and white. Luna, she decided, for the moon spots on your coat. The cub, Luna, blinked slowly in response, still too weak to do much else. The Northern Minnesota Wildlife Rehabilitation Center consisted of a cluster of log buildings surrounded by large enclosures. As Megan pulled into the gravel parking lot, her determination wavered. The logical part of her brain knew this was where Luna belonged, with experts who could properly care for a wild lynx and eventually release her back into the forest. And yet, Dr. Karen Ellison, the center's director, met Megan at the entrance. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many casualties of human interference. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Let me see," she said, already reaching for the bundle in Megan's arms. Megan hesitated before carefully unwrapping the blanket. Luna made a small noise of protest at the sudden brightness. Dr. Ellison's assessment was swift and clinical. Female, 3 to 4 months old, severely malnourished, mild hypothermia, possibly orphaned for at least a week. She looked up at Megan. "Where exactly did you find her?" "Near Whitefish Lake, by a fallen spruce. There was no sign of the mother. Probably poached. We've had reports." Dr. Ellison's mouth tightened. "This little one's lucky you found her when you did." "Another day." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "Will she survive?" Megan asked, surprised by the tremor in her voice. "Hard to say. The next 48 hours will be critical." Dr. Ellison gestured for Megan to follow her into a sterile examination room. "She's seriously dehydrated. We'll need to start fluids immediately." As they entered the room, a young man in scrubs looked up from a computer. "Is this our new arrival?" he asked, already preparing in 4-line. "Lynx cub, female, critical condition," Dr. Ellison replied, gently taking Luna from Megan's arms and placing her on the examination table. Megan felt suddenly, irrationally protective. "Her name is Luna," she said. Dr. Ellison's eyebrow rose slightly. "Ms. Lynch, I understand you're concerned, but naming wild animals isn't." "I know," Megan interrupted. "I know the protocols. I wrote some of them. But—" She stopped, unsure how to explain the connection she already felt to this small creature. "Just please take good care of her." Something in Dr. Ellison's expression softened. "We will. But you should prepare yourself. Wild animals this young without their mothers often don't make it, even with the best care." Megan nodded, suddenly finding it hard to speak. "You can come back tomorrow," Dr. Ellison added, more gently than before. "See how she's doing." Tomorrow felt impossibly far away. Back at the research station, Megan tried to focus on her work, data analysis from wolf tracking collars, habitat mapping, field reports, but her mind kept returning to Luna. The image of those amber eyes, the feeling of that tiny heart beating against her own. Just before midnight, her phone rang. "Ms. Lynch?" "It's Dr. Ellison." The voice on the other end sounded tired. "I thought you should know, the cub isn't responding well to treatment. She's refusing to eat, even with assistance." Megan sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. "What does that mean?" "It means that sometimes, when these animals lose their mothers too young, they simply give up. It's not uncommon." "I'm coming back," Megan said, already reaching for her keys. "Ms. Lynch, there's nothing you can. I'll be there in 3 hours." The center was dark and quiet when Megan arrived, save for a single light in the treatment room. Dr. Ellison met her at the door, looking unsurprised. "She's in here," she said, leading Megan to a small, warm room where Luna lay in a soft-lined incubator and 4 attached to her tiny paw. She looked even smaller than before, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Can I?" Megan gestured toward the incubator. Dr. Ellison hesitated, then nodded. "Just be gentle. She's very weak." Megan approached slowly, her heart in her throat. "Hey, Luna," she whispered, carefully stroking the cub's head with one finger. "It's me." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Luna's eyes flickered open, focusing hazily on Megan. A small, weak sound escaped her throat. "I'm right here," Megan continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't leave you. I won't leave you." To her amazement, Luna shifted slightly, pressing her small head against Megan's hand. From across the room, Dr. Ellison watched with a scientist's analytical gaze. "She recognizes you," she said quietly. "That's unusual." Megan didn't respond. She was too focused on the way Luna's eyes stayed fixed on hers, as if the cub was memorizing her face. For the next 3 hours, Megan sat beside the incubator, talking softly to Luna, occasionally dipping her finger in a special formula and letting the cub lick it off, the first nutrition she'd accepted since arriving. As dawn broke, Dr. Ellison returned, looking at the monitors with surprise. "Her vitals are stabilizing," she said, checking the readings again as if to confirm. "Temperature's up, heart rate steadier." Megan smiled tiredly. "She's a fighter." "Ms. Lynch, Megan," Dr. Ellison said carefully, "I need to be clear about something. Even if this cub survives, returning her to the wild will be challenging. She was orphaned very young, before learning vital survival skills from her mother." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that she'll need specialized care, intensive rehabilitation, and even then." She paused. "There's a significant chance she won't be releasable." The words hung in the air between them. Not releasable. A death sentence for a wild animal destined to spend its life in captivity. Unless… "What if I took her?" Megan asked suddenly. Dr. Ellison's eyebrows shot up. "You're a field biologist. You know that's not how this works. I have a cabin. Isolated. 10 acres backing onto the forest. I could build an enclosure. I could learn what she needs." The idea was forming as she spoke it, impossible yet somehow perfect. "I could rehabilitate her myself. That would require special permits, training, resources. Then I'll get them." Megan looked down at Luna, who had fallen asleep with her tiny paw wrapped around Megan's finger. "Whatever it takes." Dr. Ellison studied her for a long moment. "You know what you're proposing, right? This isn't just a few weeks or months. This is potentially years of commitment to a wild predator." "I know. Why? Why this animal?" Megan considered the question, trying to find words for something she felt but couldn't entirely explain. "Because when I found her, she looked at me like she knew me, like she was waiting for me." She met Dr. Ellison's skeptical gaze. "Because sometimes life gives you a chance to save something, and maybe that's not an accident." Dr. Ellison sighed, but there was a hint of something like respect in her eyes. "I can't promise anything, but I know someone at Fish and Wildlife who might be willing to discuss a conditional rehabilitation permit." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Just remember, Megan, she's not a pet. She's not a project. She's a wild animal with instincts you can't change." "I know exactly what she is," Megan replied softly, watching Luna's chest rise and fall. "That's why I have to try." As the morning sun streamed through the window, casting golden light across the room, Luna opened her eyes again and made a small sound, not a cry of pain this time, but something else. Something like recognition. And in that moment, Megan knew her life had irrevocably changed course. "You're throwing away your career for a wild animal." Tom leaned against Megan's truck, arms crossed, watching as she loaded the last of her equipment. "The director is furious. The university might pull your research funding." Megan secured the final box and closed the tailgate. "I'm not quitting the research team. I'm just working remotely. From a cabin in the middle of nowhere, playing zookeeper to a lynx cub." Tom shook his head. "That's not how field biology works, and you know it." 3 weeks had passed since Megan found Luna, and against all odds, the cub had survived. Dr. Ellison's contact at Fish and Wildlife had granted Megan a provisional rehabilitation license. Unusual, unprecedented even, but not impossible for someone with her credentials. Now she was moving to her family's old hunting cabin to begin the long process of rehabilitation. "I've arranged to continue the wolf tracking data analysis," Megan said, checking her watch. She needed to pick up Luna in an hour. "My reports will still come in on time." "This isn't about the reports." Tom's voice softened slightly. "Look, I get it. You saved her. You feel responsible. But professional distance exists for a reason. What happens when you spend months, years, rehabilitating this animal, only to watch it fail to reintegrate into the wild? Or worse, what if it succeeds but gets poached a week later?" Megan had asked herself these same questions 100 times. "Then at least I'll know I gave her a chance." Tom sighed, pushing himself off the truck. "Just be careful, Megan. Wild things don't understand gratitude." As she drove away from the research station, watching it shrink in her rearview mirror, Megan wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her professional life. She had spent years building her reputation in wildlife biology. Now she was risking it all for a lynx cub that, statistically speaking, still had a high chance of not surviving to adulthood. Luna was waiting at the rehabilitation center, no longer in critical condition, but still painfully small for her age. Dr. Ellison went through the final instructions as they prepared for transfer. She needs to eat every 4 hours. The formula is specifically designed for carnivore cubs. She handed Megan a thick binder. This contains everything: feeding schedules, developmental milestones, habitat requirements. There's also information on how to gradually introduce her to hunting behaviors. Megan nodded, trying to absorb it all. And remember, Dr. Ellison added, her tone serious. Minimal human contact beyond what's necessary for care. Every day she bonds with you is a day that makes returning to the wild more difficult. I understand, Megan said, though her heart ached at the thought. Dr. Ellison's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is admirable. Misguided, perhaps, but admirable. She glanced at Luna, who was watching Megan intently from her transport carrier. She does seem to have formed a unique attachment to you. The cabin was exactly as Megan remembered from childhood summers: rustic, isolated, peaceful. Located just outside the Superior National Forest boundary, it sat on 10 acres of mixed woodland, with a stream cutting through the western edge of the property. Perfect for a young lynx to learn the skills she would need. The first night was the hardest. Luna, disoriented by the new surroundings, paced restlessly in the enclosed area Megan had prepared inside the cabin. Every strange sound from the forest caused her ears to twitch anxiously. "It's okay," Megan murmured from across the room, fighting the urge to comfort the cub directly. "This is your new home, just for a while." Around midnight, exhausted from the day's stress, Megan dozed off in her chair. She woke to a strange weight on her lap. Luna had somehow climbed up and curled into a small ball, her tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Despite Dr. Ellison's warnings about attachment, Megan couldn't bring herself to move the sleeping cub. Days turned into weeks. Luna grew stronger, more curious, more alive. Her spotted coat developed a healthy sheen, and her once frail limbs now supported her in playful pounces. Megan documented everything: weight gain, behavioral developments, hunting instincts, with scientific precision. She sent weekly reports to Dr. Ellison in Fish and Wildlife, detailing Luna's progress. But clinical notes couldn't capture the moments that mattered most: the first time Luna successfully stalked and caught a moth that had flown into the cabin, the way she would watch the forest through the windows, tail twitching with instinctive interest, how she recognized the sound of Megan's truck returning from supply runs and would wait by the door. By the 2-month mark, Luna had outgrown her indoor enclosure. It was time for the next phase, a larger, outdoor habitat where she could begin developing more natural behaviors. Megan had spent weeks constructing it: a half-acre enclosure with climbing structures, hiding spots, a small artificial den, and native vegetation. The day Megan introduced Luna to the outdoor space was both triumphant and bittersweet. The cub stepped cautiously onto the forest floor, whiskers quivering as she took in the explosion of new scents and sounds. She looked back at Megan once, as if seeking reassurance, then ventured forward. For hours, Megan watched through the observation window she'd built into the enclosure wall. Luna explored every inch of her new territory, climbing trees with surprising agility, batting at leaves, digging in the soft earth. It was beautiful to witness, and painful too. With each passing day, Luna was becoming who she was meant to be: a wild lynx, not a dependent cub. That evening, as Megan recorded the day's observations in her journal, her satellite phone rang. It was Tom. "How's the wilderness rehab going?" he asked, his tone softer than when they'd last spoken. "She's thriving," Megan replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "Just moved her to the outdoor enclosure today. That's actually why I called." Tom cleared his throat. "The university board reviewed your situation. They're impressed with the data you're collecting on lynx rehabilitation. They want to formally integrate it into the research program. Megan sat up straighter. What does that mean exactly? It means your funding is secure. It means what you're doing with Luna is officially recognized as valuable research. He paused. It means I was wrong, and I'm sorry. After they hung up, Megan walked to the observation window. The evening light cast long shadows across the enclosure. Luna was perched on a boulder, her silhouette sharp against the darkening sky, watching the forest beyond the fence with unmistakable longing. Megan pressed her palm against the glass. One day, she whispered, though Luna couldn't hear her. One day, you'll be out there. I promise. As if in response, Luna turned her head, her amber eyes finding Megan's across the distance. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, woman and wild thing, connected by something neither fully understood. Then Luna leapt gracefully from the rock and disappeared into the shadows of her growing domain, already practicing for the freedom that waited. Megan smiled through sudden tears. This was the goal, after all, to lose her, eventually. To watch Luna become a ghost in the forest, living the life she was born for. The thought both broke her heart and filled it with purpose. Sweet dreams, wild one, she whispered to the darkness. Autumn painted the Minnesota forest in crimson and gold as Luna entered her 10th month of life. The gangly, uncertain cub had transformed into a sleek predator with muscles rippling beneath her spotted coat. Her once tiny paws now left impressive prints in the soft earth, and her amber eyes had taken on the focused intensity of a born hunter. Megan watched from her observation blind as Luna stalked through the expanded enclosure, now a full acre of natural habitat. For months had passed since moving the lynx outdoors, and the progress was remarkable. Luna could now climb the tallest trees with effortless grace, track subtle movements in the underbrush, and pounce with deadly accuracy. Today was another milestone, the first live prey introduction. Megan checked her watch, heart racing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Dr. Ellison would arrive any minute with the cottontail rabbits they'd agreed would be appropriate for Luna's first hunt. The rehabilitation protocol was clear. Luna needed to learn to kill her own food if she was ever to survive in the wild. You ready for this? Dr. Ellison asked, arriving beside Megan at the blind with a crate containing 3 rabbits. Over the months, the older biologist had shifted from skepticism to cautious support of Megan's project. I'm ready, Megan said, though her stomach knotted at the thought of what was to come. Luna's been practicing hunting behaviors for weeks now. She needs this step. And you? Are you prepared to watch her become what she truly is? The question hung in the air. Despite her scientific training, Megan had struggled with the reality of predator rehabilitation. The bond she'd formed with Luna made it difficult to reconcile the sweet cub she'd nursed back to health with the predator who would soon kill to survive. I have to be, she replied simply. The release mechanism they'd built allowed them to introduce the rabbits into the enclosure from a distance. As the first cottontail bounded into view, Luna froze, every muscle tensed. Her head lowered, ears flattened, eyes locked on the movement. Megan held her breath. What happened next was both beautiful and brutal, a perfect demonstration of instinct overriding all else. Luna moved like a shadow, her paws barely disturbing the fallen leaves as she circled, calculated, and then launched into a swift, decisive attack. It was over in seconds. The rabbit never stood a chance. Perfect form, Dr. Ellison murmured, making notes. No hesitation. That's exactly what we want to see. Megan nodded, unable to speak as she watched Luna carry her prey to a secluded corner of the enclosure. This was nature, she reminded herself. This was what rehabilitation success looked like. Later that evening, after Dr. Ellison had left with promises to update the fish and wildlife officers on Luna's progress, Megan sat on her cabin porch, nursing a cup of tea and watching the stars emerge. Her laptop was open, the day's observations meticulously recorded, but her mind kept returning to the moment Luna had made her first kill, how something had shifted in the lynx's demeanor, a primal satisfaction that required no human approval. The satellite phone rang, breaking her reverie. Megan? It's Tom. His voice sounded tense. We've got a situation. What's wrong? Someone's been talking to the press about your project. There's an article going around. Lone biologist raises killer lynx in secret forest experiment. What? Megan sat up straight. That's not a who would it. I don't know, but it gets worse. The article questions the ethics of your rehabilitation methods, suggests you're creating a dangerous predator that could threaten local communities when released. Megan's blood ran cold. That's ridiculous. Luna is being rehabilitated according to established protocols. The article doesn't mention that part, Tom said grimly. Look, the university's getting calls. So is Fish and Wildlife. There's talk of an inspection team coming out to evaluate the situation. After hanging up, Megan immediately called Dr. Ellison, who had already seen the article. It's sensationalist garbage, the older woman said firmly. But we need to get ahead of this. You've done everything by the book, and your documentation is impeccable. We'll show them the data, the progress reports. Luna is a rehabilitation success story, not some dangerous experiment. But what if they shut us down? Megan couldn't keep the fear from her voice. Luna's not ready for release yet. She still needs at least another 6 months of. One step at a time, Dr. Ellison interrupted. For now, carry on as usual. I'll make some calls, see what I can find out about where this story came from. The next morning, Megan approached Luna's enclosure with a heavier heart than usual. The lynx was perched on her favorite observation rock, watching the forest beyond the fence. When she heard Megan's footsteps, she turned, ears perked forward. Hey, wild girl, Megan said softly. We might have some trouble coming. Luna blinked slowly, her expression unreadable. She had grown increasingly independent over the months, no longer seeking Megan's presence for comfort, but there was still recognition there, a unique acknowledgement that set Megan apart from other humans. As if understanding the gravity of the moment, Luna descended from her perch and approached the fence, stopping a few feet away. She made a soft chuffing sound, a rare vocalization that Megan had only heard a handful of times. I won't let them take you, Megan promised, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. The inspection came 3 days later, a team of 4, 2 fish and wildlife officers, a university ethics board representative, and a state veterinarian. They arrived unannounced, their government vehicles kicking up dust on the long driveway to the cabin. Megan met them on the porch, research binder in hand, determined to demonstrate that her work with Luna was scientifically sound, ethically conducted, and following all rehabilitation protocols. We'd like to see the animal, the lead officer said after brief introductions. Megan led them to the observation blind. Luna was nowhere in sight, likely resting in one of her hidden dens after her morning meal, another successful hunt. She's a wild lynx, not a zoo exhibit, Megan explained. She doesn't appear on command. That's actually part of the rehabilitation success. The ethics board representative frowned. The report we received suggested the animal was habituated to humans. Specifically to you, Dr. Lynch. Luna imprinted on me during her critical recovery period when she was found orphaned, Megan replied carefully. But we've been systematically reducing human contact according to this rehabilitation plan. She opened the binder, showing them the detailed logs of decreasing interaction. Her hunting success rate is now 87%. She shows appropriate caution toward human scents and sounds. All indicators point to a successful eventual release. Just then, movement caught their attention. Luna had emerged from the undergrowth and was making her way toward a small stream within the enclosure. She moved with the confident grace of a wild predator, her spotted coat blending perfectly with the dappled forest light. Remarkable specimen, the veterinarian murmured, raising binoculars. Excellent physical condition. For the next 2 hours, the inspection team reviewed Megan's documentation, observed Luna from a distance, and examined the enclosure design. The tension gradually eased as they saw the scientific rigor behind the project. Your records are impressive, Dr. Lynch, the lead officer finally acknowledged. Particularly your behavior tracking system. This could become a model for future rehabilitation efforts. As the team prepared to leave, the ethics representative pulled Megan aside. Just so you know, the article that prompted this inspection came from someone with the username WildTruth21. We've traced it to the university network. Megan's mind immediately went to a conservation grad student who had visited once with Tom, Mark, or Mike, something with M. He'd seemed unusually interested in her rehabilitation methods, asking pointed questions about whether she felt rehabilitation was playing God. "Thank you for telling me," she said, making a mental note to discuss this with Tom. After the inspection team drove away, Megan returned to the observation blind. Luna was at the fence line, watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. "We did it, girl," Megan said softly. "Round one, anyway." Luna held her gaze for a long moment, then turned and bounded into the forest section of her enclosure, disappearing among the trees like the wild creature she was becoming. Megan smiled despite her exhaustion. No matter what challenges came next, today had proven one thing: Luna was thriving. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Spring arrived in a rush of green and birdsong, transforming the quiet winter forest into a symphony of new life. Luna was nearly 15 months old now, sleek, powerful, and increasingly restless. Megan noticed at first in the way the lynx paced the perimeter of her enclosure, how she spent hours watching the forest beyond the fence, ears twitching at every distant sound. "She's ready," Dr. Ellison confirmed during her monthly evaluation visit. "All the markers are there: successful hunting, appropriate fear response to human presence, territorial behavior. Physiologically and behaviorally, she's at the optimal stage for release." Megan nodded, trying to ignore the hollowness spreading in her chest. This had always been the goal: rehabilitation followed by release. Success meant saying goodbye. "We'll need to select the right location," she said, keeping her voice professionally detached. "Somewhere with adequate prey density, minimal human activity, and far enough from hunting areas." Dr. Ellison watched her carefully. "There's a section in the northern wilderness area. It's about 3 hours from here, deep in lynx territory. The tracking collar will let us monitor her movements for the first year, until the battery dies or it falls off naturally." The tracking collar, a lightweight, specially designed unit, had been fitted the previous week. Luna had tolerated it with surprising calm, as if understanding its purpose somehow. "I'd like to schedule the release for next week," Dr. Ellison continued. "That gives us time to coordinate with fish and wildlife and arrange transportation." "So soon?" Megan couldn't hide her surprise. "The longer we wait, the harder it becomes for her and for you." Dr. Ellison's expression softened. "You've done something remarkable here, Megan. Many didn't think it was possible for a hand-raised orphan to be successfully rehabilitated, especially one that imprinted so strongly. But Luna has defied those odds, largely thanks to your dedication." That night, after Dr. Ellison had gone, Megan sat by the observation window longer than usual. Luna was resting on her rock, the moonlight silvering her spotted coat. When she sensed Megan watching, she turned, their eyes meeting across the distance. "You're going home soon," Megan whispered, knowing Luna couldn't hear but needing to say the words aloud. "Back to where you belong." The week passed too quickly. Preparations for the release consumed Megan's days: coordination with wildlife officials, final documentation, packing the specialized transport crate with familiar-smelling bedding to reduce stress. Tom arrived to help, bringing unexpected support from the university. "The department is calling your project a groundbreaking success," he told her as they loaded equipment into trucks. "They're already talking about establishing a formal lynx rehabilitation protocol based on your methods." "That's good," Megan managed, focusing on securing the straps on Luna's transport crate. Academic recognition felt hollow compared to what she was about to lose. Tom paused, watching her. "It's okay to be sad, you know. Even scientists are allowed to feel things." Megan gave them a small, grateful smile. "I just want to make sure we do this right, that she has the best possible chance out there." The release site was deep within the Superior National Forest, accessible only by Forest Service roads and then a final mile on foot. The procession was small: Megan, Tom, Dr. Ellison, and 2 fish and wildlife officers carrying the transport crate between them. They moved in silence through the ancient pines, the only sounds their footsteps on the needle-strewn forest floor and Luna's occasional shuffling within the crate. They reached a small clearing beside a stream, perfect lynx habitat, with dense underbrush for hunting, mature trees for escape, and water nearby. The officers carefully set down the crate while Megan consulted the tracking receiver one last time to ensure it was functioning. "Everything's ready," she said finally, unable to delay any longer. Dr. Ellison nodded. Everyone moved back. "Megan, you'll open the crate from a distance using the release cord. Then immediately retreat to our position." Megan knew the protocol. She'd rehearsed it mentally 100 times. Still, as she positioned herself beside the crate, her hands trembled. "Luna," she said softly, "this is what we've been working toward. You're going to be amazing out here." There was movement inside the crate, Luna sensing the change in atmosphere, perhaps smelling the wild forest that would become her territory. Megan stepped back, taking the release cord with her. When she reached the designated distance, she paused, taking one deep breath. "Goodbye, wild heart," she whispered, and pulled the cord. The crate door swung open. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, cautiously, Luna emerged. She stepped into the dappled sunlight, her amber eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. She took a few tentative steps, then stopped, her nose raised to catch the countless new scents carried on the breeze. Megan held her breath, watching through binoculars. This was the critical moment. Would Luna panic? Freeze? Run blindly? Or would she embrace her freedom with the confidence they'd worked so hard to build? Luna turned, her gaze finding Megan across the clearing with uncanny precision. For one heartbreaking second, Megan feared the lynx might try to return to her. Instead, Luna simply looked at her, ears forward, tail still. A moment of recognition, of acknowledgement. Then Luna turned and bounded into the forest, her spotted coat disappearing among the shadows and light of her true home. The small group remained silent, the enormity of the moment washing over them. Dr. Ellison quietly marked the time in her notebook. The wildlife officers exchanged impressed glances. Tom placed a supportive hand on Megan's shoulder. "Perfect release behavior," Dr. Ellison said finally. Controlled, deliberate exploration followed by confident departure. You couldn't ask for better. The tracking data from the first week showed Luna establishing a territory of approximately 10 square miles, centered around the release site. She was moving normally, hunting successfully, and staying well away from human areas, everything they had hoped for. Megan threw herself into documenting the project, compiling her research for scientific publication. The university, recognizing the significance of her work, offered her a research professorship focused on predator rehabilitation techniques. Her inbox filled with interview requests from wildlife journals and documentary filmmakers interested in her groundbreaking approach. But at night, alone in the cabin that now felt too quiet, too empty, Megan would check the tracking data one more time, watching the small blinking dot that represented Luna moving through the wilderness, wild and free, as she was always meant to be. 1 month after the release, Megan was packing up the last of her equipment at the cabin when she heard it, a distinctive call, somewhere between a chirp and a growl. A sound she knew well. She stepped onto the porch, hardly daring to believe it. There, at the edge of the clearing, partially concealed by shadows, was Luna. The lynx sat perfectly still, watching the cabin with those intelligent amber eyes. Megan froze, afraid any movement might scare her away. The tracking data had shown Luna's territory extending nearly to the cabin property, but this was the first visual confirmation that she had returned to the area. For several minutes, they simply regarded each other across the distance, woman and lynx, scientist and subject, but something more too. Something that defied easy classification. Then Luna stood, stretched elegantly, and with one final glance at Megan, disappeared back into the forest, a ghost among the trees, living her wild life while remembering where she had begun. Megan smiled through her tears. It wasn't an ending after all. Somewhere in these woods, Luna was thriving, hunting, exploring, perhaps one day raising cubs of her own. And sometimes, when the forest called to her, Megan would return to this cabin. Not to interfere, never that, but to witness from a distance the miracle they had created together. That was enough. That was everything. As Megan drove away from the cabin, She glanced in her rearview mirror at the wall of trees growing smaller behind her. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, a wild heart was finding its way home. And so was she.